Italian Football Podcast.
Talking of takeovers, Elliott Management Corporation are. There was a report over the weekend that the US hedge fund had provided its availability to finance the takeover of Manchester United, and according to widespread reports really, that Elliott have informed Rain, who are the investment bank that are handling the process of the Man United takeover, that they Elliott are available to provide financing, and if Man United are not sold, we know they're up for sale, that Elliott have also offered to provide financing to the current owners, the Glazers family. So they basically offered their services to be involved in financing Manchester United going forward. So this has got, this has prompted quite an unhappy reaction from Man United fans, that they are concerned. I think generally there's always a general concern whenever any hedge funds get involved over, well, what are their ambitions for the club? Is it just as what most hedge funds is, which is to buy in order to sell on for a profit? Is it to asset strip? And these are the concerns that were there among Milan fans when Elliott took ownership of Milan in 2018. And just to rewind, this happened when Milan's previous Chinese owner, Lee Yong-hong, failed to repay his, it was a loan of 300 million euros that he owed to the hedge fund. He failed to repay, defaulted, and Elliott took over. And there was a lot of concerns at the time. Milan were in complete shambles on and off the pitch. They were hundreds of millions in debt. They'd just gone, I think, a sixth season without even getting into the top four, without getting into the Champions League. They hadn't won the Scudetto since 2011, and there were fears that Milan would be driven into the ground, really. And to be honest, this was kind of, you could understand these feelings, because if you ever look at the history of the involvement of Elliott with just Google Elliott Argentina. Just Google that and see the history in that country and all the problems that happened there. To say it's too long and complicated to explain it here, but you will see. So there was a lot of fears, basically. But you know what? As we look back now, 5 years on, and Elliott sold the club in September 2022 to Redbird Capital for 1.2 billion. If we look at the time, the 4 years or so that Elliott were in charge of Milan, we have to say they did an absolutely fantastic job of rebuilding and resurrecting Milan as maybe not a European powerhouse, because that's not really possible for Italian teams, but certainly it's a powerhouse of Italian football, which they weren't when they inherited them. There's a lot of successes which I'll quickly go through. They reduced Milan's debts massively. They still have debts, but they've reduced them hugely. They did this really by a couple of things. First of all, they installed a salary ceiling, and they were overpaying players, not particularly good players, huge salaries, which was a legacy thing going back to the time of Berlusconi, when Berlusconi took over, of paying such huge salaries to players. And then their transfer policy was based around scouting, buying and developing young players rather than established players. So they went out and looked and scouted for teenagers and young players, and they brought back Paolo Maldini, who had been in exile for years since he retired as a player. Stefano Pioli was installed as football, and there was a kind of a clear identity really from top to bottom. They modernised the club on and off the pitch. Pioli played this modern football, kind of attacking, high intense, high press football. And the transfer policy was magnificent. They if you look at the players that they signed as pretty much nobodies or as youngsters, and the way that they developed into stars. I mean, Rafael Leao, Theo Hernandez, the two big ones, but you got Tomori, you got Kalulu, you got Tonali, you got Benacer, and then you look at some of the other youngsters that developed there. They weren't necessarily signed, like Donnarumma, for example. I mean, everything was about building a kind of a sustainable project, and look at the results. They got back in the Champions League, and then they overachieved, I would say, in winning their first Scudetto in 11 years last year under Pioli. And when they left Milan in September, they left them in a much infinitely healthier state, both financially and sportingly. So I think, wouldn't you agree, Nima, that they did a very good job?
They did an absolutely fantastic job, and I think it started with who they appointed. They appointed Paolo Scaroni, who is one of the most impressive Italian business people around. I mean, he's the guy. He was a CEO of Fortune 500 companies, Enel, Eni. These companies are not small companies, and he's the chairman since 2018. They appointed Gazidis to put in a structure. We did a fantastic job until he left.
Mm.
And Paolo Maldini as the sporting CEO, sort of, quote unquote, and in my opinion, probably the best sporting director in all of Italy, Enrique Massara, who is brilliant at finding young, talented players and a coherent project and matching a coach to that. That's what they did right, and they all and everyone knew what they had to do in terms of the financial ceiling and the debt reduction, and look at the results. I mean, since then they've returned to the Champions League. They're now in the round of last 16 for the first time in a decade. At the second attempt back in the Champions League, they won the Serie A. You can't say and you can't say anything. You can't say that they did not do a good job there.
No, they did. The scouting department as well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Monsada, that they got from Monaco. He was at Monaco during the years when they were developing. Remember all those great youngsters when Mbappe and Fabinho and all these kind of all those great players. They got him, and he's come in, and I think there's no it's no coincidence that when he came, the amount of great youngsters they were scouting off from the French market. A lot of players from the French market. Magnon, we should really include, even though he wasn't super young for a goalkeeper, he was. And look what's happened to him. He's genuinely, I think, top 5 in the world now in his position. So, I think they did a great job. And there was a lot of doubts. We all had doubts. No, anybody that says they didn't have concerns are lying. Everybody did. Everybody, and I'm not going to lie, including myself. I was very, very worried because we know what hedge funds generally. We know what their modus operandi is, isn't it? It's to increase the value and sell, but they did it in a way that benefited everyone, including themselves. So in that sense, they did a great job. Whether or not Man United are in the same situation that Milan were, that it would benefit them taking over, I don't know, because it feels like, Man United are in the Premier League with all the riches of the Premier League and with all the riches.
It's also Man United. It's a different ball game. Yeah, it's a
different ball game in that you wouldn't go to Man United. They couldn't possibly go to Man United and run the club in the same way that they run Milan. Cost cutting and with low salaries, they just couldn't. They couldn't run it in.
If they could do a version of it, which kind of Erik ten Hag is kind of already doing, isn't he? Like he's kicking out, like the way he handled the Cristiano Ronaldo situation, the way that he's built again this kind of credibility in the dressing room around players that you either deliver or you don't. And I think, it depends on who takes over. I think I understand it more. I still think that the Qataris will take over, and my money is on them. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
Me too.
Yeah, but we'll see. But I do think that if Elliott take over, they'll do a hybrid, and that's kind of what Sir Alex Ferguson did, didn't he? He was very responsible. He had amazing success, but he was responsible. He didn't just hand out golden contracts left, right, and center. No. And I think that's what Elliott would do at Manchester United as well.
Yeah, they're not gonna run the club. So that needs to be made clear. They're not bidding for the club to take ownership of the club. They're bidding to help with the financing. So it's different in that way as well. But I just wanted to talk about this just to dispel the myth that I've seen all over among Man United fans, and that it's kind of been spread that somehow Elliott were a complete failure and destroyed Milan. I have seen this widespread.
Yeah, I did.
I've seen this widespread.
Certain Man United influencer said it.
Yes.
Who I had to quote tweet and make fun of because that was
Goldbridge. Was Goldbridge one of them?
It was Goldbridge tweet. I quote tweeted.
Right. Did he say that Elliott?
He said I can read it for you because
I'm just guessing because he's usually the first one to.
He said that Elliott group from USA did a terrible job with AC Milan, then sold them. Not a good candidate tweeted it, in my opinion, and I quote tweeted that and said, "You're right. Elliott forced Milan to return to the Champions League and punished them further by winning their 19th Serie A title. And if that wasn't bad enough, they appointed Paolo Maldini as a director who rejuvenated the squad with lots of talented young players. Hashtag pray for Milan." I mean, he's an idiot. The man's an idiot. He literally is one of the dumbest people in the United Kingdom, and there is competition for that title. So well done.